Dear Mr. Atheist, you cannot prove that Joseph Smith didn't meet God and translate the Book of Mormon. Whew, dang, you got me on that one. I wonder what else is true just because I can't prove it isn't. Welcome back to Dear Mr. Atheist, and more specifically our mini-series on what's wrong with Mormonism. If this is your first time here, usually on Dear Mr. Atheist, we answer the questions and assertions that atheists hear time and time again. But once a month at the moment, I'm producing a mini-series specifically about what's wrong with Mormonism, because Mormonism is the background I came from. So if you have never been a Mormon, I'm not saying leave. In fact, I think most non-Mormons have found this series so far to be very interesting. Just know that that is what we are talking about today. I decided to phrase the opening argument the way I have actually heard it the most. And sure, I can't prove that Joseph Smith didn't meet God and write the Book of Mormon in a legitimate way, just like I can't prove the claims of Muhammad or L. Ron Hubbard. That said, I think there are a lot of reasons why one can logically conclude that it is extremely likely that the whole story is a fabrication and that Joseph Smith did, in fact, make it up. And so today I'm going to focus on this thing that the Mormons call the first vision, as well as some of the origin facts about the Book of Mormon. Now, in a future episode, I'll actually go over things within the Book of Mormon itself that make it seem to be a work of fiction, but today we're focusing more on the origin story. You know, just like every comic book movie needs to stop doing. And I want to show that I don't actually have any hard feelings or hatred for Joseph, so I'll tell you what, as I go on, each time I say Joseph's name, I'll try and get a little more personable. Let me start off by telling you the story that if you are interested in the church, the missionaries will tell you, but also the story that within the church you are raised with as a child. This is a story that you would hear before being asked if you'd like to be baptized. It's sort of the core claim to Mormonism. The story goes like this. A young Joseph Smith had been attending many churches and church services, trying to figure out which one he should join. Joe becomes very conflicted and he goes to the Bible, where in James he reads this verse that says, "If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God." Lucky for little Joe, he was born a him, so God was interested in talking to him. And after pondering on this verse, he decides to go into the woods where he can have some privacy and ask God, which gym should I join? Oh, sorry, I meant church. I get miserable places kind of mixed up. According to the story, right as he begins to reach out, he's engulfed by this shadowy presence. And right as he's about to succumb to the Dementors, he reaches out to God in his mind once more, and the shadow is pierced by a great light, and standing before him is Jesus Christ and his Father, God Christ. And at this time, Joseph is told he's going to be restoring the one and only true church to the earth. But for now, he should go home and do whatever he wants except masturbate. So years of never masturbating with lamp oil go by, and in 1823, the angel Moroni commits a B&E into old Joey's room and spends the night telling him about this book he's going to get. He's told about this ancient civilization in America that wrote their history down on golden plates. Because, you know, a civilization that apparently had been making advanced steel weapons before any of the rest of the world and before it had ever actually been really invented as a method of refinement, oh, and by the way, they also then hid all of those steel weapons, so anthropologists couldn't find them, even though they apparently numbered in the millions. They thought the best way to go ahead and record keep was to scratch what they wanted to say into some golden pancakes. That's not fair. Based on some visual representations of them, they're kind of thinner plate. It's kind of more like golden crepes than pancakes. Anyway, a little bit later, Jobin goes to a hill that he's directed to and digs up these golden crepes. And he keeps this a secret from everyone except for some friends, a couple scribes, and some family members. Those people who were exposed to them are referred to as the witnesses in the Mormon Church. And actually what's interesting is if you actually look at their accounts later, it's kind of revealed that Joseph wrote their witness testimony for them, and none of them actually laid eyes on the plates themselves, with the exception of one person who stated that he did see them with his spiritual eye. Back to the story. So then the hobbits go to Mount Doom. What? Oh crap, sorry, I got mixed up again. what is it? Oh yes, he uses a magical breastplate and spectacles called the Urim and Thummim to translate it. While he's wearing the Urim and Thummim, he's able to just look down at the plates and see the translation and then dictate that to his scribe. Again, this is the story as told. I think they're omitting the part where the scribes were totally jelly of Big J's new specs. But that is the origin story of the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith and his claim to what happened and why he was chosen by God, or how he was chosen by God. And that is what's taught to children. Okay, and for the record, I might have added the part with the Dementor. There was a shadowy thing. Also the part about the lamp oil. And I don't know if anyone was actually jelly of those sweet, sweet spectacles. For decades, perhaps even centuries, this is the only account that virtually every member of the church knew. This is the only origin story that anybody learned. But it turns out with further inspection, that actually isn't the whole story. And in fact, there are several other accounts, many from Joseph himself, that bring this into question. And real quick, I want to tell you about something that was extremely frustrating for me growing up. See, that was the story I knew. But around my freshman year of high school, an episode of South Park came out that presented a different origin story to the one that I had heard. And to tell you the truth, at the time I tried to play it cool and like, oh, it's just a joke. South Park's a joke show. But I was mad. And then I would try and go around and correct the record wherever I could and tell them, no, that isn't right. Well, here's the thing. It turned out that the episode of South Park I am talking about was more closely correct to the historical account than I was aware of, even though I was enrolled in seminary at the time. It turns out that the way most of the members believe that the Book of Mormon was translated by Joseph isn't the actual way it was. And you can actually find this on the LDS Church's own website, where they talk about the actual way he translated the Book of Mormon. It had nothing to do with the Uma Thurman. So here's some actual history. Joseph Smith, I said I would keep it more casual. Let's go with Joey Smith and Wesson. Joey came from an extremely superstitious family who believed in all kinds of witchcraft and magical objects. While digging for a well one day, he came across a stone, which he immediately decided was a seer stone. And very conveniently, at this time, this stone was apparently really good at showing him where to find buried treasure. It must have been going super awesome, because in 1826, he ends up going to trial for glass looking and for defrauding people using his divination practices. Now, the written account of this trial says that he was found guilty. And that is actually what I think is likely to have happened. However, the church and the apologists for the church will dispute that and basically say the bill that verified it happened at all didn't include the guilty verdict, and it would have or should have, and so they don't believe he was found guilty. However, that opinion of being adequate proof that he wasn't, that seems to only come from the church. And keep in mind that this is the same church who vehemently denied the trial ever happened at all, said it did not and could not have happened until 1971, when these same bills showed up and were unearthed. And now they're saying, okay, fine, the bills prove it, but the bills also prove that he wasn't found guilty. You could see why I have trouble with that line of thinking. Now, after this trial, Jay Smizzle realizes what he's done and that he made a mistake, and he never uses seer stones again. No, I'm just kidding. You see, we actually now know that the method he used to use the Book of Mormon is he took that very same stone that he had found digging up a well, he placed that stone in a hat, he put his face to the hat, no golden plates nearby, put his face in the hat to close out the light, where he would then see the words as they would have appeared on the plates, which presumably were in a secret closet or something, and their English translation above them, and he would dictate that to his scribe. And again, if you look for it on their website, the Mormon Church absolutely does confirm that this is the actual method that the Book of Mormon was translated. And what's odd is it doesn't seem to bug them. But the good news is that this new, more witchcrafty, kooky version of the story, well, the church, they share that with people before they ask them if they'd like to make their covenant with God for all time and eternity, and before they ask them for baptism. No, I'm just kidding again. They absolutely don't do that, and this is 100% kept from people They are baptized with the belief about this Urim and Thummim, which is still a pretty weird thing, and the story as is. In fact, public access to this information, if again you go looking for it, that is a pretty recent thing, and it's because they were kind of exposed and up against a wall. And that's kind of a common repetitive theme with the Mormon Church, but we'll talk about more of that in the church history episode later. Now, another thing that the membership of the church is mostly unaware of is that Geronimo and his second in command and best buddy, Oliver Cowdery, had both been exposed to a book prior to writing the Book of Mormon called View of the Hebrews, which oddly the Book of Mormon seems to take a lot from. You see, View of the Hebrews makes a similar claim that Jodelehu would make later about the heritage of the Native American people, specifically that they come from a Jewish line, that they are lost tribes of Israel. Now, thanks to modern DNA science, we know that there are no Native Americans who are Jews, who are related to anyone who lived even close to Jerusalem. How odd then that Josuke and Oliver would make the same claim to a historical fact that we would later know to absolutely not be true. And it's a little suspicious that Ethan Smith, who wrote View of the Hebrews, he's not related to Joseph and his family, he was actually a pastor at the church that Oliver and his family attended. So we know that back then especially, and still not now, there was no scientific reason, no historical reason, no anthropological reason to believe that Native Americans had Jewish ancestry. So it seems like if this is somehow still true, it must have been that Ethan was getting revelation also, that Joseph then got later, that he was actually inspired by God of some kind of truth, but then with that level of inspiration and clarity to write a book, never himself joined the Mormon Church? It seems odd. And when I say odd, I mean it would take a lot of mental backflips to dismiss all of this as just some kind of coincidence, some kind of just not really anything that matters. But unfortunately, a lot of Mormons are up to the task of doing those mental backflips. That's if they just don't outright assign what the story I'm telling you now as anti-Mormon, which Mormons are programmed to label things as anti-Mormon and immediately dismiss them as total lies and fabrication. As a matter of fact, I suspect this video will be designated as anti-Mormon. So anyway, I guess I'll continue being Satan's pawn, and let's go back to talking about this thing called the first vision. Another kind of odd thing is there is no account prior to 1835 written in anyone's hands that the first vision happened at all. That's some 15 years later, and there are no accounts of it. Also troubling, it was actually omitted in the 1835 official history of the church that was penned by Joseph and Oliver Cowdery. Sorry, I mean penned by Joko Ono and Ollie Cowboy? And in fact, it wasn't included at all in a biographical sketch written by his mother, Lucy. These are some of the most important things that happened to Joseph, if true, that are the origin story for what is now a pretty major world religion. And it doesn't bother anybody that nobody decided to bring it up for 15 years? And by the way, it's not taught in the church for 22 years. And in fact, there's this internet challenge out there for $2,000, so it's not a lot, but it's not a little either, that if you can find any record of that happening, of the first vision account prior to 1835, anyone claiming that he said that happened, it doesn't even have to be in Joseph's own hand, you can claim that $2,000. It doesn't help that around that time, there were lots of people actually having very similar visions and revelations that never had anything to do with Mormonism. And in fact, there's one account in specific that's so similar to Joe Obama's that one might suspect he stole it from him. Also problematic, there are actually several different accounts of the first vision, some by Joe Pro himself, and frequently different through these different accounts, including the ones that were from Joseph, not just his friends and people he confided in. Was his age changed and where he went changed? Some of the accounts talk about Jumanji seeing an angel. Sometimes he just sees the Lord. And in some of them, he meets Jesus and his dad, Mr. Christ. AJ, was it in poor taste to do that joke 2 times? I just really like that joke. Okay, thanks. In the very first account that he writes by his own hand, he never mentions God the Father at all. And these different accounts kind of coincide with the different way he views God and how God exists and the nature of God throughout that time period. The nature of God and whether there was just one God or many gods changed quite a bit through the progression and evolution of Joseph's narrative. And during this project where he's retranslating the Bible, he actually changes a Bible verse to talk all about how Christ and God are one, and that's only revealed to whom he decides to reveal it to. Oh yeah, I'll talk about that in a different episode. He was working on a revised Bible. I don't know. Come on. One's tempted to say this is all too stupid to make up, but I still think he did. I think it's just the right amount of stupid to be made up. So what an odd thing it must be for a man who the official narrative is now met two distinct individuals, God the Father and his Son Jesus Christ, to then go through a phase in his life after that supposed encounter where he believed they were in fact the same individual. Again, things just aren't adding up. Is there a left Twix and a right Twix or not? Is it all one Twix? For the love of Twix, tell me. And so I want to close this out by talking directly to people who still believe. Listen, I get it. I know how much this church and your faith means to you. It used to mean so much, maybe everything to me. But if Mormonism is true, it should have nothing to hide, and it should trouble you how much has been hidden to this point. And we're just getting started, baby. Please subscribe so you can watch the future episodes. Shameless plug, I'm disgusting. And so I really want to encourage you to actually look for answers and don't just recite the answers people gave you and go, okay, that's good enough because an answer exists. That's a good enough answer. That isn't good enough. And so if I can recommend to anyone of any religion what I think is the best advice I could give anyone, don't rely on faith alone to get you to truth. Faith can be used to literally believe anything. The entire world is filled with faithful people and they can't all be right. And with things that we do rely on to be absolutely true, like science, apologetics would not fly. So you have to have a secondary way to truth besides faith, because you have to have a way to figure out what you have faith in is true over what other people have faith in. If you are both on the same basis and you have contradictory beliefs, you have to have a way, a mechanism to determine which of you is right if either of you is right. And when you have doubts, it's okay to demand evidence. And I'm sorry if this will seem extremely personal, but do not trust anyone who tells you when you have doubts that the first thing you should do is doubt your doubts. Anything that is so clear and so true that having doubts about it, you would be better off doubting those doubts, those things should have had overwhelming and incredible evidence for them, like how the earth is absolutely round. By the way, the reason why I kind of exploded there at the end, I'm literally working on an episode about flat earth right now. I can't believe that that's even necessary, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed that one too. But again, always remember the truth has nothing to hide, and you should never be ashamed if you have questions, and you should never be ashamed when new evidence is presented to you to change your mind. Thank you again so much for watching. If you want to watch the first episode in the What's Wrong with Mormonism, you can click that up here. If you want to watch last week's normal episode about vaccines, click that down here. If you like what we do, please throw us a bone, like and subscribe. That's really, really helpful for our channel. Also, come hang out with us in the comments. Social media links are in the description below. And remember always, stay skeptical, my friends.